Hey everyone, welcome to Tales and Texts. I'm your host Nisha. In today's video podcast, I thought I will talk about two types of cartomancy techniques, specifically the card pulling technique that you can use when you're using tarot, oracle, Lenormand, Kipper, or any other deck. Now, the card techniques are something you might all be familiar with, but the nomenclature is something that I'll be using differently. So, for example, what I have planned to do here is to call the two techniques that I typically use in my practice as conscious choice versus divine download. So, I'm going to be taking you through what conscious choice cartomancy pulls and divine download cartomancy pulls actually mean according to me, and I'm going to be talking about some pros and cons of each, and then we're going to end this video podcast with a discussion on which technique is better when you are working with tarot cards, oracle cards, or any other kind of cartomancy and divination device. So let's start with divine download first, because that is something that you would all be familiar with, just under a different name. Now, when you shuffle a deck, whether it's a tarot deck or an oracle deck or any other deck, you shuffle the deck and then you lay out the cards. Now, how do people normally lay out the cards? Now, if you have seen online, you would see that usually readers lay out their cards with the front imagery facing down, facing on the table. And what you can see is just the backs of the cards. And when the card is pulled, we are essentially pulling a card without knowing what image or what card is there or what message is there on that card, and then we turn the card around and then we see the message. Now, to me, this technique is something that I call the divine download. Now, why do I call it the divine download? Now, often many people call this technique as the blind pull technique, when basically you can't see what you're pulling and therefore you're pulling it blind. I personally find this terminology a little offensive, and I feel it's very inaccessible and just not the right way to name a particular practice. And so that's why I've decided to name it divine download. Now, according to me, when we pull cards without knowing what message is actually on the card, and we trust that spirit, that our deities, that our spirit guides, that the universe, whatever it is that you believe in and whatever energy it is that you work with, that this particular energy will help you make the right choice when you are pulling the card, you're essentially downloading that divine guidance from another realm. And that divine guidance is sort of informing your physical decisions, such as, for example, pulling the cards. Now, that's why I call this technique the divine download, where you don't consciously select your cards, but you trust that the divine will help you make the right decisions and make the right choices when you're pulling the cards. And whatever message you receive, you believe that to be message from the spirit or from the universe. Now, that's divine download. Now, at the other end of the spectrum is another practice that I do, which is called the conscious choice card pulls. Now, this is exactly the opposite, wherein when we shuffle the cards and we lay out the cards, we are actually laying the cards face up. So you are making sure that the imagery on the card is facing up towards you and the backs are on the table. So you can see the images on the cards as you lay them down. And now when you're about to pull a card, you look through the images and you consciously select a specific card to work with. So for example, if in a divine download, you pull a random card and it turns out to be the magician, for you, it is like it's a message from your divine, from your spirit guide, that you need to understand the message of what the magician is going to bring in, and you're going to work on that energy. But with a conscious choice pull, you deliberately select the magician card because you want to work with that energy. Now, online, if we see at least 95%, maybe more, of tarot readers, oracle readers, and other cartomancy practitioners follow the divine download method. Seldom do you see readers who very openly select consciously the cards that they want to work with. Now, I personally, when I started practicing tarot, I would rely solely on the divine download method myself, because that was what I was taught. But fast forward to today, and especially in the past 5-6 months, I've seen that consciously choosing which card to work with can be just as effective as the divine download method. And so that's exactly what I want to talk to you about right now, about what kind of cartomancy would be ideal for you, and whether you should be choosing the divine download method or the conscious choice method, and which one should you actually work with. Now, in order to understand this and in order to make a decision, I have made a list of pros and cons for each. And then we're just going to be going through each of these pros and cons quickly so that we can understand what benefits you get from each of these methods and what disadvantages are there in working with each of these methods. And then we're going to wrap it up with making a decision on what kind of card pull is ideal and for when and for whom. And we're just going to leave that there. And of course, as always, do remember that these are my personal opinions, and of course there might be other people who have other opinions in terms of what kind of card pulls you need to do. So do make sure that you listen to different perspectives and then take a mindful decision about what practice works best for you. All right, so let's start with the conscious choice, because divine download is something that a lot of people do, and so I'm sure a lot of people have multiple opinions about that already. So I'm going to start with some pros and cons of the conscious choice. So let's start with the advantages of conscious choice card pulls. So first of all, conscious choice card pulls help you mindfully lead your day. They help you consciously and mindfully select a particular energy, select a particular message, and align each of your actions to that message. So when you're consciously selecting a card, you are deciding to embody that energy and to implement that energy and to bring in that force within your being. You want to, for example, you pull out the card of the Queen of Cups. And the Queen of Cups is all about nurturing, about providing emotional support and being open with your heart and sharing and giving love. And so when you're choosing to work with this energy, you are mindfully and consciously deciding to embody the Queen of Cups energy. And for example, you might have been feeling that maybe you haven't been too vocal about how much you appreciate all of your partner's efforts, and so you want to let them know, and so you consciously decide to tap into the Queen of Cups energy and to let your partner know that I care about what you're doing and I am so grateful for you and I love you. And so you're embodying this energy consciously. So in that way, conscious choice pulls will help you identify what energy is lacking and consciously manifest it. Because sometimes that happens, right? We need a tiny reminder to keep reminding us throughout the day that, hey, this is the goal we have set out to do. And so when you consciously pull a card, for example, the Queen of Cups, you can keep looking at this card if you put it up on your altar and remind yourself that every decision you take today, every action you do should be aligned to this particular goal. The second advantage of conscious choice is that it is definitely a very empowering practice because it puts free will at the helm and instead of fate. Now, we've seen how a lot of, especially people who actually get tarot readings done, but they don't know much about tarot themselves, as in people who are not practitioners but only clients or customers. They tend to assume that tarot is only about fate and only about divination and only about things that will happen, which are set in stone and which can't be controlled. But we as tarot practitioners, we know that tarot is a guide to creating our life into what we want it to be. Now, with a conscious card pull, conscious choice card pull, you are empowering yourself by taking a proactive action to pull the card that you want, and by identifying what you need, what energy is needed, what mindset is needed, what spiritual energy is needed in your life on that particular day, at that moment, or for a particular project. You are consciously creating a life that you want based on a alignment between your spiritual and physical energies for that day. And so this conscious choice, as the name suggests, it puts your free will, your agency, your conscious decisions into the forefront, into the driver's seat, as they say. and it allows you to consciously manifest what you want. Now, even for example, if you're doing if you use tarot and oracle for your magical workings, let's see, for example, that's something that I do a lot. I use my cards for my magical workings, for my spells. Now, conscious choice cards are extremely good here because you are setting up a spell with a particular card that you have deliberately chosen to embody a particular energy or to embody a particular outcome, and you're using this card to manifest what you want. And so it puts your agency, your free will, and your decisions at the helm, which is very important in terms of co-creating your life with the help of a spiritual and divine energy. So that's the second advantage. Now, the final advantage that I see with the conscious choice cards is that it lets you explore your cards and your spirituality in more ways than one. Now, what do I mean by this? Now, if you have watched my other video where I talk of top tips for tarot readers and oracle readers to reconnect with their practice, in that I provide a set of tips on how you can use your cards, whether they're tarot cards, oracle cards, Lenormand or whatever, and how you can reconnect with your practice and get back into a daily practice schedule. Now, I provide tips on that, and in some of those tips I talk of alternative ways to use your cards apart from the spiritual aspect of it. Now, with a conscious choice card, you can actually set yourself up to use and to connect with your cards, to connect with your spirituality in a much deeper way and in a much more versatile way. So, for example, you can pull a card on, let's say, for example, you pull the Empress card, right? Now, the Empress card imagery shows a lot of trees and flowers and fruits, and there's all this abundance and prosperity around. You can use that energy to pick a particular element, for example, the river in the Empress card, and you can go and try to find out about your local rivers. You can try to find out if there are any anti-pollution boards that you can be a part of. You can find out if there is any river cleanup or any local water body cleanup opportunities, volunteering opportunities that you have that you can do over the weekend. You can find out how you can contribute towards providing clean drinking water to lesser advantaged people in your community. So, in a way, your cartomancy will inspire very real, very impactful action outside of the spiritual realm, outside of just the divination realm. And that's because you've consciously chosen a card and you consciously want to study and work with that card on multiple levels, so that in terms of in all facets of your life. And usually this doesn't happen with your divine downloads, because divine downloads, as we'll discuss in a little bit, have a completely different agenda when people use them. And so you don't really see a lot of your unconscious card pulls as being something that inform action, mindful action in realms apart from your spiritual life. So that's not very common. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but that's not very common. So now these are the advantages that I see with conscious choice. Now, what are the disadvantages that are there? Because obviously every practice has a disadvantage, right? For one disadvantage is that you might ignore the messages that you absolutely need to hear in favor of messages that you just want to hear. So, for example, you pull cards consciously, right? And you choose which energy you're working for in that day or on that day. And when you're pulling these cards, you might get into a habit of pulling only those cards that make you feel happy or which empower you. And when I say empower you, I mean it not in just the positive sense, but which empower even the negative habits, which empower even traits that you could do without. And essentially you start to pick those cards that kind of second or support your existing feelings and your thoughts, and that's when it becomes problematic, because you start to kind of become this echo chamber, right, wherein you are saying you are in a closed chamber and you are shouting out your own thoughts and feelings, and that's the same things just echoing back to you, so you feel like everybody else is in consensus with you as well. So It becomes like that, and you might miss out on messages that you absolutely need to hear because you are not allowing spirit to guide your messages as well. So that is definitely a disadvantage that is there with conscious choice. Another disadvantage is that this conscious choice technique does not work as well if you don't go beyond the conventional usage of tarot and oracle, or you don't go beyond the traditional messages within that system. And again, like this example is something very similar to the positive I gave, like for example using the river imagery in the Empress card to see how you can volunteer with your own local water body activities. Right now, with the conscious pull, unless you go beyond the traditional upright and reversed meanings of each cards, you won't be able to get the most out of your conscious pull. Conscious card pulls work the best when you mindfully try to explore all the facets of that card and try to implement things that are not even there in the for example the meanings that are not usually provided on books or on websites or in videos, and you try to see how this archetype on that card affects your day-to-day lives and how you can bring in this energy or how you can modify this energy to very consciously, very carefully, very smartly create your day, right? So if you don't look beyond the conventional system of cartomancy, if you don't look beyond the conventional meanings in that card, then conscious choice cards or conscious choice pulls just don't help you get as much value. So that becomes problematic. Now, the final disadvantage with conscious choice pull is that it reduces the magical element and the mystery that is always there inherently in cartomancy and in spirituality. And it essentially makes your card pulls, daily card pulls, become boring and a chore. Which is true, right? I mean, sometimes half the fun is in not knowing what card you pull. And if you are consciously choosing a card each day, there is nothing to look forward to because you're putting so much thought into what card I want to choose. And so it becomes a chore. You start to think about which card should I choose tomorrow, which card should I choose next week. And what happens is sometimes because you're so focused on trying to decide what card to choose in the next subsequent couple of days, that you don't really commit, that there is a chance that you might not commit to the card that you pulled today. There might be a situation where you're so fixated on what you might choose in the future or what you might do in the future that you don't live today with complete commitment and passion, as you can say it. So this is definitely a problem with conscious choice. And sometimes when you don't have that magical element, you might feel like not continuing with your daily card pulls, and which is a shame because you don't want your card pulling technique to affect your commitment to that practice, right? It shouldn't affect the joy and the love that you get out of this practice. So now we've seen the pros and cons of conscious choice. Now let's just take a look at the pros and cons of divine downloads. Now the first benefit that I see with the divine download card pulling strategy is it strengthens your connection to your spirit guide, to your deity, to your universe, to the energy that you work with. In a way, your divine downloads strengthen your instinct tremendously because you're learning to trust the universe and you're learning to receive the messages from the universe. And that's a beautiful thing to do because all our lives, all humans are told that that your intuition is something bad, that your intuition is something that you need to shut down right now. And you are told day in and day out that you should trust what you see, trust what you hear, trust what you taste and feel, but feel as in physically feel, but not something that you feel spiritually. And so when we grow up in an environment where we are actively discouraged from trusting our intuition, we lose that spiritual connection. Now, divine downloads will allow you to re-strengthen and rebuild these spiritual connections. It helps you rebuild connection with your ancestral spirits. It helps you rebuild a connection with your other spirit guides, with your deities, with any other magical energy that you're working with. And it helps you build your intuition so strongly that it makes you makes your practice much stronger. right? And it makes you someone who can trust yourself even when you have no evidence for something that you're feeling or that you can sense. It makes you in a way more aware of the world around you and more informed, because now you have these strong spiritual inputs coming as well. So divine download card pulls, wherein you basically pull a card without seeing what message it is and you trust that spirit will guide you to the right message for the day, definitely helps you overall improve your intuition and your spiritual connection. Now, another advantage that I see with divine downloads is that it helps in breaking any negative traits and patterns. Now, remember how I was talking about one of the disadvantages of conscious choice, wherein you might start picking messages that you just want to hear instead of what you need to hear. Now, divine downloads help in combating this very problem, wherein you can break the habit of getting into that toxic habit of choosing specific cards just because you like them. Sometimes what happens is we just like the imagery of certain cards, and so we just want to keep looking at them, and so we pull those cards. Or we like the idea of certain messages, and so we pull those cards. Now with divine download, because you don't know what you're pulling, there is a very limited opportunity to get in our own way, spiritually speaking. We break these patterns of relying too much on a specific suit or a particular deck or a particular set of cards, and we allow all cards and all messages equal opportunities to appear before us. Another and the final advantage that I see with divine download is that it keeps the magic of cartomancy alive. And I say magic in more ways than one. Of course, the mystery of having to pull a card that you don't know what card you're going to pull is going to be so amazing. But beyond that, there is just some magic in the air when you pull a card without knowing what card you're pulling. And sometimes the synchronicities are just unbelievable. And that magical element of synchronicity is something that so many of us readers are always in awe of, no matter how many years it's been that we've been practicing cartomancy or magic. And so divine downloads allow you to retain the magic of card pulls while also retaining the magic of your spirituality, while helping you connect with your own magic, build your own magical powers, and trust that your energy, your energetic presence in the world can, it can have a very strong impact on other energetic presences, that your energetic presence can be sensitive to the subtle energies that are around you. This magic is something that's hard to recreate with conscious choice, and divine download allows you to do that. Now let's consider some of the disadvantages of divine download practice. First off, right at the bat, there is too much focus on fate. And like I was talking in the beginning of this video podcast, a lot of readers who, whether it's customers or readers both, in fact, tend to look at tarot as a solely divination tool, which it isn't. It can be a wonderful personality development tool, a psychologically counseling and motivating tool. It can be a tool for scientific study, and I'm not just talking about studying of the psychology or the archetypes behind the cards. I'm talking about actually looking at the imagery and the elements on the cards and seeing their real world applications and cultural nuances and anthropological and technological facets of those imagery that you see on the card. Now with divine download, what happens is, because we are believing and we buy into the fact that spirit is guiding us to this message, the universe is guiding us to this message, so it must be fate. We put free will on the back seat, on the back pedal, and we push fate forward. And what happens is, when this happens a lot of times, especially if it's a reader who's new and they are not sure how to use tarot in different ways, or if it's a client who's sort of very fixated on the whole divinatory aspect, then they might start believing that there is absolutely nothing they can do to change the outcome of whatever the reading has been about. And that can be such a disempowering message. So even when we don't want it to, divine download card pulls can become very disempowering by removing the concept of free will from our mind. by making it seem like, this is the only thing that can happen, this is the only outcome possible, and that's when things become very problematic. Another disadvantage of divine downloads is that the reader might become too dependent on tarot and oracle or any other cartomancy in their day-to-day lives. So what I mean is, for example, when you're doing a conscious card pull, for example, you pull a card and then you consciously make sure that any decision or any action you take embodies the spirit of the card in such a way that you can have a positive impact. Now, whatever decisions you take on the spur of the moment or through a planned way, but ultimately you wanted to achieve a particular goal which is in alignment with the card you consciously pulled. Now, what happens to divine download is that you don't know which card you're drawing. You believe that this is the message that universe wants you to hear, and now what happens is, after a point, especially if your card pulls start becoming more and more accurate, more and more synchronous with real life experiences, and you begin to actually experience the divinatory benefits of your card pulls, you might start to pull your cards for absolutely every decision that you want to take. And you start to believe that, hey, okay, should I go to work today or should I skip work? Okay, I'm going to pull a card to see what the universe wants me to know. Or for example, should I go to the pet shop today to buy a fish, or should I get a dog home? Let me pull a card and see what the universe has to say. Simple things like this, which you need to be allowed, or you need to let yourself make decisions on your own without help from your cards. You start to rely too much on your cards, and then there is also the flip side. For example, when I talk to you about how divine downloads help strengthen your connection to the divine, there is also a flip side wherein too much over dependence on your card pulls can make you can actually reduce your connection to your intuition as well, by making you second guess yourself. So for example, you've been given a job opportunity and you need to decide whether you want to go ahead with it or not. Now your heart is telling you, what, maybe I should take this up, maybe this is going to be good for me, even though it's something completely different from what I've never done before, and from what I've done before, so I should probably take it up, even though it's different, it's scary, it's going to be good for me. That's what your heart is telling you, that's what your intuition is telling you. But you're not really sure, you're starting to second guess yourself. So you want to pull a card, and the card you pull, for example, let's say it's Nine of Swords, right? Everyone knows the Nine of Swords card, it looks really scary. The Nine of Swords card has a very heavy and sort of depressive air around it. And so you might get scared looking at it. You might think like, okay, you know what, maybe the universe is telling me that I shouldn't take this up. I'll probably say no to this job opportunity, job offer. It happens. People do this. It's a reality. This does happen. And that's where divine download card pulls become so problematic, because you tend to over-rely on these cards and you don't give yourself the opportunity to think critically about the opportunities that come to you, because we are humans after all, right? And especially when it comes to things like divination, if it works for you all the time, you might become too fixated and too reliant on these card pulls, on these divine download card pulls to help take your decisions, even the simplest decisions, which can be very disempowering. And the final disadvantage that I see with divine downloads is that it sets up a lot of pressure to have the perfect reading. And when I say perfect reading, I mean everything, right from setting up the sacred space, to choosing the perfect deck, to having the perfect spread, to having the perfect layout, to getting the perfect Insta-worthy image. As readers, especially if we are on if we are on any social media platform, we see that we have to contend with these challenges of having the perfect kind of reading, and we might have a particular ideal in mind, and because divine download, you don't know what kind of card you're pulling, and so you want to be accurate, because deep in your heart you're worried that you might hear a message that you don't want to hear, and so you want to choose the perfect questions, you want to choose the perfect spread, you want to have the perfect space created so that everything is falls into place exactly how you want it. There's just a lot of loose cannons, as they call it, in a divine download pull, because not everything is controlled by you, and so you're more worried about the outcome, and it puts up a lot of pressure in setting up that connection with your spiritual entities, in For example, you might want to smudge the room each time you pull a card. Well, that might not be actually necessary, but you believe that if you don't do that, if you don't do this practice, your ancestors might not respond to you, or your deities may not open channels of communication, and so you start to build these superstitions around the card pull as well. I think that's the right way to explain this particular disadvantage, that you might get into the habit of going beyond a certain number of steps or practices that have actually yielded positive benefits in your divine download pulls, and you might start developing these superstitions that might not really be real, but these superstitions are affecting your card pulling practice, and by extension your life, your day-to-day general mental health and mental well-being as well. So as you can see, both conscious choice card pulls, wherein you consciously select each card every day to work with, and divine download card pulls, where you pull a card at random and trust that the universe or spirit is leading you to the right message. Both of them have their own advantages and both of them have their own disadvantages. Now, what kind of a card pull should you choose? Now, I personally work with both, but the situations that I work with them are different. So my conscious choice card pulls are something that I do every day, every morning, and I pull a card and I look at the message that I want to embody that day. And usually the message that I want to embody is informed by the previous day or the previous week, or what I want to manifest in the future. And so I journal every day in the morning, and so I kind of jot down my points of what I want my day to be like, what my ultimate goal for the day is, what my day should look like. Call it like a daily vision board, for example. And when I see that vision board, my daily vision board, I recognize, okay, maybe this is the area that I want to work with today, and I want to change this. I want to make this more aligned with what I want. And so I pull a couple of cards that are resonant with that energy, and I write them down in my diary. So I have a diary/planner. I write it down in that, and every time I open the planner to make in my to-do list or to read some affirmation that I've written down for the day, I look at the imagery of the card. I look at the message that I want to kind of embody. I also write down notes in terms of all the elements of the card that I want to explore outside of the spiritual and philosophical sphere, and I try to make that happen. So that happens every morning, and every night I do the divine download card pulls. Just before going to bed, I pull a card at random without knowing what it is. All the cards are face down, and I pick a card at random, and that becomes a message that I carry forward with me during dream time. It could be a message that is pertaining to my day, something that I missed and which the universe possibly wants me to know and wants me to action the next day. Or it could be a message for the future, a divinatory aspect, something that might happen in the future and I need to keep a lookout for, and which my conscious choice card pulls will either help make a reality or will help avoid. I hope that makes sense. So in a way, both of these card pulls are feeding into each other. Conscious choice helps me manifest what I want. Divine download helps me find out things that I've missed out on, or things that I'm avoiding, or any mistakes. Like for example, if you go back and listen to the positives of both conscious choice and divine download, you'll see that both of them are complementary to each other. So if conscious choice focuses on free will, it helps avoid the focus on fate, which divine download brings in. If divine download retains the mystery of and the magic of cartomancy and spirituality, it avoids the boredom and the banality that comes with conscious choice. If conscious choice card pulls help us live each day mindfully and try to make our day consciously better each day through our own focused efforts, then similarly the divine download will ensure that we hear the messages that we also need to hear at that moment instead of just what we want to hear. So you can see that they're kind of playing off each other. And I think the best way to work with both of these is to use both conscious choice card pulls and divine download card pulls in a complementary way, so that you can get the best out of your cartomancy practice. And at the end of the day, your cartomancy practice should be something that helps you become more aligned with what you envision for yourself. And by using conscious choice card pulls, you are putting down the roots and laying down the foundation to work towards what you want. And with divine download card pulls, you are seeking that extra help, that extra magical support from your deities and spirit guides and ancestors, which will help you take you across the finish line. So in that way, you are working with the universe to co-create your life. And ultimately, isn't that the goal of using your cartomancy? So yeah, this brings me to the end of this video podcast, and this has been fun. So do let me know in the comments which kind of cartomancy pull that you usually do. Do you have divine downloads, or do you use conscious choice pulls as well? Do you use both, or is there any other technique that you use? I love to learn about people's shuffling and card pulling techniques, because it's really fun to practice all of those and to see what results they lead for you personally. So do let me know. And if you stuck around with me so far, thank you so much for listening to this video podcast, and I will see you in the next episode of Tales in Text. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel for amazing content. And also, if you're interested in reading the critical edition of the Mahabharata, I have an entire readathon playlist just dedicated to that. So do go ahead and check it out. Alright, thank you everyone. Have a wonderful day. Bye.